All right, welcome to the David F. House podcast. I'm in the studio with my good buddy Tony Smith, owner of the Garage Gym, host of the Tango One podcast.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right on. We keep jumping back and forth on each other's podcasts, but fuck it, I like it. It's fun.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for it, man. You're chirping me because of the glasses. So I was just coming into your office and I saw glasses on your table. I'm like, oh, Dave's got glasses too. And then I'm like, oh, don't. Those are mine. Yeah, I love coming on and pleasure to be here. It's been a minute since I've been in your office. It looks great.
Yeah. We're trying to up our game and get a little more consistent and get a nice cool backdrop. Eventually, I'm going to get a little logo here. It's going to be cool.
The logo will definitely make it a little bit cooler, but yeah, I like it. Subdued, makes me relaxed.
Yeah, that's it. That's the idea. So, anyways, you're coming in. We're doing some stuff, but I thought that would like kind of a perfect synchronicity to have you on the podcast because I just went through this experience in my life where, and I know it's not like this is like first world problems, but I was playing in a golf tournament like this year. I kind of like set the intention to become a better golfer. Like I kind of quit sailing. I'm still sailing, but like not as competitively as I was. And I'm like, I'm going to start playing golf. And I started playing golf a lot, practicing, doing all this stuff. And I got really good really fast. I went from, for the golfers out there, I went from like a 17 handicap to like an 8 handicap over the course of this year. And it's from doing what I do, like what I believe in. I hired coaches, I practiced, I did all this stuff. And so then I started playing in competitive tournaments. And then it unlocked this whole new level of like, of the game for me, which was the stress element of it. Now, even though I could say to myself, this doesn't matter, it's just golf, it's fun, I couldn't, no, I don't want to say I couldn't, but I didn't have the tools yet to become aware of how much that mental stress was going to affect my physical body. And in golf, it's like, if your physical body is not like, in perfect alignment, all your fast twitch muscles are all messed up and like you're just going to make mistakes. And so like I played the championship match yesterday and like I just gave it away. I won in a 3-hole playoff. We had 18 holes. We were even after 18 holes and we had a playoff for 3 holes and I finally beat the guy. And but I made so many mistakes because of nerves essentially. Right. And so I'm like, you're coming in here today. I'm like, oh, Tony would be a great guy to talk about stress because like you're on the tech team and you're like, doesn't get any more stressful than going into a house with someone that might have potential guns and all of this stuff. And I know you and I you hear the catchphrases like slow is fast and fast is smooth and all of that kind of stuff. But what I'm really interested in is like, how did you get comfortable in the stress of like breaking down people's doors essentially?
Right. So,
or policing in general. It's like, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Policing, sports, competition, any kind of competition, really shooting is a great one. Like not even shooting in a drug raid, but shooting in like a competition, which you used to do as a kid, remember? Like finally, like very fine tuned, right? But with the stress that starts to go, you lay behind a rifle as a sniper or from a long range and you're trying to make a shot. Your breathing is heavy. You start to lose control of those motor functions. Your breathing is messing with your eye, your sight line, right? There's all those things. So there's so much to unpack when we talk about that. Yeah. So this is why like bow hunters will miss a deer that's 10 feet in front of them.
Right.
This is like the stress is this. There's actually a physical sensation that goes through the body. I was so amazed at how much it was affecting me physically. Like I could literally feel it. I felt the feeling I had was like weak. Like I felt weak was what I felt. And so it was just like a reminder to me of like people that are living in stress states all the time. It's like completely throwing their fucking bodies off.
Oh
like,
my God. Yeah.
Fight or flight. We were trying to tell people all the time at the gym, right? That you don't want to like a good workout essentially is putting you under stress.
Right.
Like I had a great workout today, but that is a stressor. It's not really a stress relief. It's a stressor at the time.
Right.
It's the rest that comes after that's going to put you back in. Stress is necessary, right? It raises cortisol. Stress is really good for you as long as you can get back out of that fight or flight. And some people literally live in fight or flight.
100%.
So you got to get from like that back part of your brain without going too far out of my lane.
Yeah.
But you can't be in the back part and the front part at the same time. So in the back part of your brain, you're in fight or flight. Right, that's where your eyes are going to widen. You're going to start to get auditory exclusion, right? You're going to get tunnel vision. Things are going to get small. And the faster that you can get out of that and back into the front brain where you're actually thinking, analyzing, looking for solutions, the faster you're going to spin that cycle, right?
Yes. And so Did you guys have like, like tactics that you guys were using in the TAC team to combat, the effects of stress on the body when you're, when it was really important?
Yeah. So if we talk about we can unpack that a little bit more and start talking about a concept maybe.
Sure.
And I think you've heard me talk about this before in the OODA loop. You've heard me lecture on the OODA loop before? So the OODA loop is made by a fighter pilot with the concept, but the old fighter pilots, like where it was like the Spitfires, like one plane versus one plane.
Yep.
The old school guys, and where, you're driving when you got your scarf and your leather hat on, flying at each other. And the idea is observe, orient, right? Decide, act.
Observe, orient, okay.
So the more you practice that, and the faster I can get through that loop, and even more important, interrupt that loop on you, the more success I have, the greater chance of success I have.
Okay.
So if I can interrupt your OODA loop, throw you into stress, right? Get you from the ability to process that loop back into the back where you're in your fight or flight, the better my chances are winning. The faster I can process the loop, the better the chances are that I win.
Yes.
Right. So basically, one of the best ways to get us there that we would use is experience, but experience comes through real calls.
Yes.
And we try to train before we get into the real calls. There's only so much you can do. The real call will still be the real call. You can't practice for it really, but you can do your best to prepare. And what we would do is putting people under actually physical duress.
Yeah.
So physical duress being exercise, sleep deprivation, bringing guys out. One of the things we do in a selection course, I know your cousin Ryan, he went through my original selection course and now he's a grizzled team leader, right? But at the time I remember putting him through this course, and the idea is we're going to take away sleep. We'll put them under physical duress. We're going to test them for both performance, through the gun range, the skills we had taught them, but also to see how they handle themselves, how they communicated, how they remain team players or not team players. And that's what we're looking for. So there's just so much to that. So one of the ways, and when I was training Randa, the UFC fighter, right, one of the things that she was struggling with was actually getting, a lot about fighting more than I do, but 5-minute round is insanity, right? Like a 5-minute round in a UFC type fight, a mixed martial art, or any kind of combat sport is insanity.
Yeah.
They get 60 seconds to rest, catch their breath, get iced, but also to get the information in from their coach. So it was very important for us to try to get Randa from a absolute, somebody's trying to choke and kill her basically,
right,
to in a 60-second window be able to process the hey, she's leaving her left forearm down, you need to go with a high kick or something like that. Right. When she does this, she's cueing on that she's going to kick. That's your time to do a takedown. That was a struggle for her. So we would simulate it in the gym, which is kind of funny. And I would do this actually on gun ranges too. But with her, we'd put her through a very, 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 cardiovascular fitness intense where she's going to have her heartbeat skyrocketed. Yeah. Because really the only thing that can make you feel the same way that you would if you ran into a terrible car accident, you pull up a terrible car accident, is that physical, absolute, you're where you can barely catch your breath, you can't get any air in. That's when you start to feel very similar to a hot call, to a gun call, to a murder scene. And so for her, we'd put her through that for 5 minutes, and then we'd come out of it, sit down on your box, which would simulate her chair. Yeah. And I would give her a puzzle to do, one of my kids' children's puzzles. Right. Simple math. Yeah. So that she's going from front to problem solving. Gotcha. Or from back, fight or flight, to problem solving in the front. Yep. So a really interesting way to do that. And, we do that in the gun ranges too, is run people through an obstacle course, but make them stop and figure something out. Yep. Right. So in practice, the more you do it, the better you're going to be. Yeah. And that's what was coming to me. And actually that advice that you gave there is similar to the advice I got from a buddy of mine today when I was telling him about my match. And he says, what you have to do as a golfer is build a routine that you actually have to think about. So it's you stand behind the ball, you look at your line, you address the ball, you put one hand on, you put the other hand on, you waggle twice, and then you hit the ball, right? And he's like, if you have a routine that you have to focus on, right? What focusing on that does, it pulls you into the present moment. Because what I've recognized, and obviously it's connected to the work I do, but all stress is created from the mind projecting to some sort of outcome, right? Projecting to, I have to, in golf, it's I have to make this shot, or in policing, it would be
I might get shot, right?
Right.
And so that is what creates that stress response in the body, is this constant projecting. And so if you can come up with some sort of mechanism that pulls you into the present moment by focusing on something else, because the mind can't focus on two things at once, which you kind of mentioned, right? And so that will pull you out of all of that projecting to the good or bad outcomes or things that you need to do. And that's essentially what you do in like meditation as well, right? You're focusing all your attention on the breath. And so every time you find the mind wandering away, you bring your attention back, and just the having to focus on something gets you out of thought, which gets you out of fight or flight. And that's why, you know, so many people swear by meditation and stuff, because it's got so many healing properties.
Right, absolutely. And you hit on a few things that I use regularly when I was, you know, doing these things, and still use. But when we were teaching or I was executing drug warrants, gun warrants, high risk operations, is to actually, like when we're training, to exaggerate looking around, right? So exaggerating moving your head so that you're breaking tunnel vision, right? Not being on. You've heard me say that if you're, you know, with just leadership in general, if you're the one looking down the sights, you can't see anything else. If I'm just looking through the sights of my rifle, I can't see anything else. So getting people off that so they can look around, process things, and actually make more, you know, threat assess in a much higher way. And then breathing throughout that. Yeah. So exaggerating your breathing and you're looking around, just like you would with a kid. You know, I coach my children. It's like, we want to exaggerate the footwork, exaggerate how good the footwork is here in practice. Because when you speed up in the game, it's going to digress.
Yes.
Or regress.
Yes.
Okay, whichever the proper word is there. Don't grammar correct me. ChatGPT. Right? So that same thing with us on gun range. And you know, you played a bad guy for us a few times.
Yeah, right.
The same thing for that is we want to really exaggerate the looking around, really exaggerate our breathing, and try to keep that breathing consistent, right? And then same thing when you're trying to break somebody out of that, you know, you see a newer guy or is under high stress, or maybe it was just something we've never dealt with. Yep. And it's like, hey, big breaths, look around, take deep breaths, look around, get them out of that as soon as you can so that they can think again. Because, you know, SWAT guys do need to think just like a golfer. Sure. And then the further point to that is like, if we can always prevent the problem before it happens. So with your golf game, you talked about your routine. So that's something to really focus on, is you're trying to get ahead of what you see as a potential problem when the big crowd at your golf tournament is all cheering and, you know, like, right?
There was no crowd.
I was joking with that, but you've created some routine, but you're also going to you've put mechanics into your swing that are going to allow for you to keep consistent despite what's going to happen. Yeah. So with us on a gun range, I know doesn't matter how trained I am, if I'm going towards that door right now and Zach, the camera guy, jumps out, I am going to be startled in some kind of way. What's going to happen when I startle? My body's going to get square. I'm going to get low. My eyes are going to get big. So we train, unlike the sniper training that you had as a kid that you've heard me talk about this on the gun ranges with our courses, is I'm not training to shoot like little dots. Right. I'm actually training to shoot with both eyes open, square to my target, because that's where I'm going to end up. Yeah, when something startles me. So I practice in there. So that when I do that, I just end up in my gun position. Right. That's kind of where the method is.
Yeah. So it's almost like it's almost in some ways like a repetition of movement. Like he's talking about my guy was talking about the repetition of that sequence, but you're training that repetition of like, hey, this is where we go when everything goes wrong.
You're going to get put in fight or flight.
Yes.
You're going to get put there.
Right.
So when I get put there, I want to be practiced there.
Yes. And so now for sure, I guess I got two questions. One is, you know, part of that stress showing up for me, and it's like, I feel kind of awkward talking about it saying golf, but it's just the fact that it showed up, and because I'm interested in the mind and how it affects the body and all that, I was just like hyper vigilant and really paying attention to what was going on. But when that stress showed up to me, my initial response was like essentially to myself, like, you're such a pussy, you know? And so the question I have for you is, do you think that it's like certain people have different levels of stress responses, let's say, maybe, you know, because like, I remember like, you know, you played all sports in high school, and I remember you taking the game winning shot. I saw that video in basketball, right?
Yeah, maybe half court.
Right. And so it's like, you know, that to me is showing me that, you know, under stress, you perform well. And, you know, I played hockey and I played volleyball, I did MMA, and like all those are very reactive sports, meaning like if the game got stressful in hockey was like I had to score the goal. It was like I actually rose to the occasion because it was just like a response. Like there was no mind in it,
Right.
you know? But now in golf and going into a house and doing, it's like, there's so much mind involved. And so now I'm experiencing this and I'm going, what am I, like the biggest pussy on earth? I can't handle a little bit of stress, right? And so I'm wondering, one is, do you think you had a proclivity to being, less affected by that stress response? Or two, is it natural for everyone to kind of feel a stress response and the challenge is to learn how to work through it essentially?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
I mean, I think there is some ability, and like I love what you said too. Like I coaching 2 sports right now. We just finished baseball and football, and the difference between the stress in baseball when a kid is at the plate, even just watching my son at the plate or watching my son pitch, where that is like, it's such a finite movement. There's so much time for his brain to think. There's so much time for my brain to think even watching him. It's very similar to golf. Whereas when, I hand the ball off to Braun, my youngest, in the football game, guys are coming at him and he just moves, right? He's not thinking. Yes, there's training that went into that before.
Sure.
Right. But it's the difference. And there is quite a bit of difference in the stress. And I think that, yes, everybody is prone to stress, and some people are better at dealing with it. It's probably from growing up. I mean, I know you're very into like, the childhood trauma and whatever else, right? But there's also childhood experiences that are very good, stress experiences that helped you deal with it. That's why coddling your kid, following them around with a water bottle and a spray, a fan is probably not the best way to make them tougher and more able to deal with the world. And I think that wherever your peak stress lies, and I talk about this all the time, is that I always make fun of teachers on this one because I have so many teachers in the gym. And when I first came, my trouble with, conforming out of the police department with normal people, so to speak,
right,
was that I couldn't relate. They would be complaining about not getting in their report cards, and their stress level was so crazy.
Right.
And I had literally watched a man slash his throat the night before and didn't even experience that kind of heartbeat that they have right now for their, right? It's just peak stress versus peak stress. Mm-hmm. So for us, that feels even because but even though when you're looking from the outside, those 2 events are clearly one's more grave than the other.
Right.
Right. So if that makes any sense.
And when you're saying this too, it's like, it's kind of like motivating me for our event that we're going to do at next year, right? Which is like, because that's what we're going to do. We're going to put people in stress. And so now for sure, because you experience higher levels of peak stress than other people, like I'm talking about a golf game, peak stress, you're talking about like guns drawn, like going into houses with bad people. They're not even in the same ballpark, right? I'm guessing dealing with that level of stress made business, now you're a business owner, made business stress a lot easier to handle essentially.
Yeah, it definitely has. And you've seen it. I get, people have said this to me. I know it's true. I get eerily calm when things are chaotic. The airplane that we were on, that the engine lit fire, encountered a grizzly bear.
Right.
Right. And I remained calm. And I remember talking right through that situation to the girl who was with me, like, remain calm. We're going to back up, put your bike over your head. Very calm as this grizzly standing there. It's just, I think that's from years and years of training. Right. So for that, it's very difficult in a lot of ways to, like, how do you put yourself in those situations? You don't really. Right. So I think that's a good quality when leadership, like when the chaos happens, leadership needs to come down. I get calm and quieter.
Yeah.
Right. Also, so that people lean in a little bit closer. So you're within striking distance. Another great reason to get a little bit quieter. Right now, you very rarely hear me yell and scream. Right. So I think that all goes into it as well. There's so much to really unpack when it comes to that stress, and you will get better at it the more experienced you are at golf. Like you just said, like you just leaned into golf hard this summer. If you continue at that rate, 5 years from now, it's going to be a joke. The first time you got on a sailboat and had to jump around doing all those knots in the wind and all those things that you guys do, I'm sure it's like moving up in a sport. Do you remember moving up? You played hockey. Do you remember moving up from whatever it was, house league, to maybe travel?
Yeah.
I remember moving from high school football to AKO. Yeah. I was like, I was the best player on the field in high school. I felt like I could see the game. I'm moving. Then we move up and everybody's faster. And it's like, whoa, like you don't even know what's happening.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, 3 years later, it slows down again.
Yeah. And like, I mean, it's very similar to pretty much anything. It's like, in the beginning, I think everything's going to be elevated, right? It's like, I always give the example at your wedding, actually, in Costa Rica when I was surfing. And I was like, pretty much surfed every single day. And so on day one, I'm out there and like all I could think about was sharks. Like I was just like, I just thought there were sharks everywhere. You know, day 2, a little bit less, day 3, a little bit less. By day 4, I was like, there wasn't even a thought crossing my mind about a shark, you know? And so it was like that. I just sat in the fear long enough that the fear just, you know, recognized like it wasn't going to win, I guess is what it is. And then I was able to enjoy myself instead of being in that like fight or flight mode. Right. And so I think part of the problem that we have is we live in this world now where it's like life's like pretty fucking easy. You know, it's like, you know, we have perfectly controlled temperature, you know, and like my fucking pool heater died the other day and it's like, we didn't go swimming because it was like 72, you know.
Which would have been like beauty when we were kids, right?
Exactly.
So funny. I talked about this at football the other day for my little kids. They're only 7, 8, 9.
Right.
And there was all kinds of bad weather. Last week was our first week of practices. And I was getting parents coming up. How do I make my kid more aggressive? Because we're just started tackling.
Right.
And so I held a parents meeting and I said, listen, like you're more disappointed than we are because we're used to this and you expect your kid to get out here and just be a savage animal.
Right, right.
However, I want you to look back at the last 7, 8, 9 years of this kid's life. All you have told this little boy is to keep their hands off each other.
Yeah.
To not touch that, to not hit that, to not jump at that. And now you put equipment on them and you have some other little boys who have been here a little bit longer now running at them at full speed. Yeah. Of course they're not jumping into contact. We've created a very soft version of this boy.
Yeah.
So to expect in 3 days of practice and new equipment, a new environment, new people, for him to go from passive to aggressive, it's not going to happen. Can we do that over the course of 8 weeks? Yes. A little bit. For some, none. Right? Yeah. For some, 0. But for some, like you'll see a massive transformation in that. So it's the same with all the games, with all the things, and with business for sure. I think with business, it's really helped me to just, you know, really have some kind of perspective, I guess, on things. Like, you know, you're great with that. You say, and then what? Yeah. You know, and with me too. And then what? Like, is it that bad in here? No. I mean, is this workout that bad? Yesterday, people were complaining about our 9/11 workout. And this is such a ridiculous comparison. But it's like, oh, God, if these guys can run into a fire, I can certainly finish, you know, the 800 step-ups I've got to do. You know, like it's just some perspective. And that's ridiculous and a, you know, absurd comparison. But if you really have some kind of perspective to things, it really helps you get through the moment at hand.
Yeah. And I think what also, it really gives you an understanding of how much your thoughts and the way you're thinking can affect your physical body, right? It's like last night, I went to bed last night. Like I'm literally, and I know this sounds stupid. I keep saying that, but it's like after that, I actually had the golf tournament. I had to rush to sailing. I sailed, and then I went home, went to bed. I woke up at like 4 a.m. today. Like my mind was still like I was still in that like vigilant state of like fight or flight essentially. And it's like today I feel like a little bit like groggy, and it was like it took a lot out of me, right? And so I'm like, holy shit! It's like if you're stressed about can I pay this bill or you know, am I going to die? Am I going to get an illness? All of these things is like, that's what's happening to you all of the time. And you're unconscious of it. And so I was actually in some ways grateful for going through the experience because I'm like, whoa, like the understanding of the power of the mind over the body, it just got to like a new level for me. Right. And so I was like, Jesus, this is what, you know, this is why people need to be hyper vigilant and do this work. Because if you don't, it's like, yeah, your mind could literally kill you.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I believe that what you say with the mind making you ill, you can make yourself ill. You're sitting in that stress every single day. You're making yourself ill. And one thing that you talk about too, and I don't think people really talk about it enough, is the adrenaline dump. Is where you're going. The adrenaline dump is it's a crazy thing, you know, and you experience it with that grizzly bear. The second that grizzly bear shot off into the woods, I went from being the calmest, like warrior in a garden, you know, to like my chain had fallen off as a result of me jamming on my brakes on a mountain bike when I ran into the grizzly.
All right.
I couldn't get the dexterity in my hands. I couldn't get the chain back on. I'm not mechanical. I know you're probably thinking that right away, but I know how to put a chain on.
Sure. Right,
and I couldn't do it. I had to get the girl who was in there. I'm like, can you get this chain? I couldn't do it. Right. You feel that adrenaline dump. And then the ones that you're feeling like way after, like you talked about, is we go do a crazy call. You know, we'll talk about like the shooting right before I left at McDonald's. Insane call. You know, I'm checking my friend thinking he's got holes in him. I'm driving an ambulance with him in it to get him to the hospital. There's a dead body there. There's cops everywhere. you know, all that charge. Then you go through, write your reports and you're very in sync. Then the second you close up that computer and your day is done, you're like, phew. And almost to the point that sometimes with those adrenaline sounds so bad that like after a crazy call, you'd be almost like broken to tears, if not broken to tears, because your adrenaline dump would be so huge. And you're just like, oh my God, what just happened? And you know, to my dismay, many times we took that adrenaline dump and went to the bar with it.
Sure.
You know, and that was how we dealt with it. And in a lot of ways it was good because we're there debriefing, we're spending time with people who actually understood, but then we're adding that alcohol element into it, which sometimes can take it and push it too far.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think it's all just really interesting, and I think there's an importance of putting yourself into those situations because we just gotten so comfortable. So it's like, we got 3 minutes, you got to get going here, but like, if we're just giving this to the layman, you know, the guy that's not shooting people and playing professional golf tournaments, like just guys like me and you, or not me and you, guys like, you know, well, like me, but like, what are the tools? And the one tool I pulled away was I got to keep putting myself in that situation.
Exactly. I was going to say, you're essentially describing the 9-year-old boy that I just described.
Yep.
He was never in that situation. How's he going to succeed?
Yeah.
You know, you're completely relying on him to have some kind of natural instinct to succeed.
Yeah.
Which, you know, maybe can happen. I don't know, to be honest with you, but I do think some people are better at handling stress than others, obviously. But yeah, it's training for it. And the only way to train for it is, I think, us dudes, especially like men, as soon as they hit 30 and now like really 40, as we start to have kids, you know, you trade in all relevance of a nutsack. And you come back with like, and you're just like, you neuter yourself. And that's 100%. I don't think that's what a wife wants. That's what a son or a daughter wants.
No,
they want you to keep that certain element of manhood, you know, and of warrior, of whatever that is, that's innate in us, I think. And so the only way to do that is to get out there, do something that scares you, go speak in front of people, go take a MMA class that you've never, with no training, go do something, you know, jump off a building, do bungee jump, anything like that. I think like men are really need to do that to keep themselves alive. And for us, that's, you know, some of the wild trips we've been on. I think that was what's happening in those. You know, for the most part, right?
And I think it's like not so much about like seeking, like being an adrenaline junkie. It's about looking at it through a context of I need to put myself in situations, you know, so that I can recognize how I respond in these stressful situations. And then I think that the second part of it would be, then you can link that extreme stress to what's happening below the surface when you get a little bit stressed,
right? You
know, and so that in itself, that awareness in itself, I think it's like would be super healing. So, I mean, I guess the advice we're kind of offering is, well, get yourself stressed out a little bit, notice what's happening when you're stressed out, and then start applying that same noticing and the same tools that you use to push through that stress, you know, into your daily life. And then you can start living this life of like, you know, just more peace. And it's like, and to sum it all up, it all comes down to like present moment. It's like, if you can find a way in stressful situations to get present by focusing on a routine or whatever that may be, you're going to snap yourself out of that like insane stress response as alarms going off.
That is not me. And you're right. So for that, like, I really think if you imagine this circle, so anybody not watching who's listening to this table's a circle.
Right.
And if this was our lives, right, and we put a dot in the middle of it, that's like your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I get out of that comfort zone, that like next layer of circle, which is maybe 5 times bigger than that dot we put in the, you know, that quarter that we have in the middle table, we put something that's maybe the size of a coffee can or a bucket. That's like our learning zone. Mm-hmm. And every time we get out of that comfort zone and into the learning zone expands, and so does the comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I think that's like one way to definitely look at it. You got to continuously get out of that zone to experience, because the more time you spend, it's just like when you were fighting and me, you know, training for Jim Jones, or the first time you're under another man's body when he's pinning you down, he's taking all your air away. Mm-hmm. You're in panic.
Yeah.
And then the next time you get in that position, you're like, no, I lived through this last time.
Yeah.
I'm going to be fine. And it's like that with business, with money, with, you know, stocks, even. Like, it's like the further you get out of that comfort zone, the more you learn and the bigger you expand your comfort zone.
100%. I think it's also too, like, you know, is to, when you are there, is to not judge yourself. It's like, if you experience stress, like I just did in golf or whatever, it's like, it's like you look at recontextualize it as I'm getting better, you know? Yeah. Did you feel weak and did you feel, small and like a pussy? Sure. But it's like, but I'm getting better. I lived through it, And so
you want to do it again.
Yeah.
Right. That's the adrenaline part of it. Adrenaline is something that's like, it's got a charge to it. You want it again.
Yeah.
You want it again.
Yeah.
It's
So
awesome.
the more you live there, the more you're going to live a stress-free life, in which will have all kinds of health benefits. So yeah, I thought that was perfect, man. Thanks for taking the time to come on the podcast.
Oh, I appreciate it very much.
We have the Tony Smith, David Haas series going. So I come to his, he comes to mine. So this is part 6. Of the series,
6 or 7. And then between the speaking at each other's events, we're probably at like more than that, like 12 or 15.
Probably, yeah, right up. Okay. Thanks again, man.
All right. Thanks for having me.